Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and today I want to discuss the Call of Cthulhu scenario, The Lost Expedition. Written by John Hook and published in 2016 by Goodman Games, the adventure is part of their licensed Age of Cthulhu line. Now, first things first, look at that cover. It's great. I first discovered this adventure during its Kickstarter campaign, and I got one look at those investigators in a jungle facing off a tentacly, multi-eyed T-Rex, and I was all, oh hell yeah, I am in. Now, while this cover is fantastic, I will say that it's a wee bit spoilery. So for the game, I employed a book cover. That way my players didn't see it until it was time. The scenario itself is pretty short. Not counting the handouts and the pre-generated characters, it comes to 30 pages. It can be played in a single session and has both short and long introductions to allow for single session gaming, but I would recommend that you prepare for this to take 2 sessions to complete. The adventure is more action-packed than a normal Call of Cthulhu module. We used the Pulp Cthulhu rules for it, and it was a match made in heaven. So if you're looking for a more pulpy, action-y adventure, this is it. Now, it does provide 5 pre-generated characters. They appear fine, but I fit this scenario into an existing campaign, so I didn't use any of the pre-gens and can't really comment on them specifically. The scenario sends the PCs to the Gobi Desert in Mongolia to find a paleontologist and his expedition. The characters will be scientists, support staff like medical, mechanical, and muscle, or investors and legal representatives for the Chicago Museum that's funding the dig. So there's a good array of professions that the characters could have. Now, for any players in the audience, from here on forward I'm going to be going into the details of the game, so it'll be spoiler central. So if you haven't played this adventure, I suggest that you stop here and send your GM to check this out. So have a great day, but it's time for the Game Masters to have a chat. Alrighty keepers, let's dive in. The Lost Expedition has a whole lot to offer. We go from the desert to a mind-bending alien dimension, to a strange planet. We face eldritch horrors, both new and classic, insane human beings, and if you hadn't guessed by the cover art, freaking dinosaurs. This thing is a hoot. A brutal, sanity-shattering, action-packed blast. So, let me lay out the adventure and offer my suggestions and criticisms as a keeper.
Hey, and I'm Jack, the NPC. I'm going to give it to you from a player's side of things.
The adventure begins with the players being contacted by the Field Museum of Natural History. One of their expedition leaders, Dr. Samuel Norris, has been illegally shipping fossils back from his dig in China. On top of that, his specimens are so preposterous that the museum is convinced that the doctor is modifying them in order to boost his own reputation. So they've decided that the only course of action is to fire Dr. Norris in the dig. The PCs are given photographs of these ridiculous relics, the letter of termination, and the names and photographs for Norris's expedition team that will be returning with the PCs. The border regions will provide all of the travel arrangements, but the module doesn't give any payment amount. Keepers should offer some sort of payment for the PCs to do the job. Because of bandits that are in Inner Mongolia, the PCs are told that they will need to be armed for their own safety.
Yeah, I've been playing enough Call of Cthulhu to know that when the keeper says, hey, you need a gun, you need 8 guns, you need RPGs, you need knives, sharp sticks, everything.
Once the PCs arrive in Peking, they meet their liaison, a bureaucrat named Cheng Li. Cheng Li is extremely suspicious of the PCs and will try to discover any evidence that Dr. Norris has been illegally smuggling fossils out of China. If he does, he'll arrest Norris and the PCs as being his conspirators. And unless any of the PCs speak Chinese, he's the only person that can speak with any of the 22 porters that are going to be accompanying them. The module has 4 possible openings, ranging from longer scenario play that allow the PCs to prepare and provision themselves, to a short convention play where it begins the moment that the PCs arrive at the dig site. I really like that the module allows for these options, and props to Goodman Games for giving these provisions depending on what type of game is going to be played with it. Once the PCs arrive at the dig site, they discover a strange and gruesome scene. The site is abandoned. There is animal dissection and evidence of strange creatures. On a rock shelf above, the investigators can discover the rotting body of one of the expedition team that appeared to have died while fleeing and now home to a nest of pit vipers.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
In Dr. Norris's tent, the PCs will discover a journal discussing the strange humming sounds in a nearby cave. One criticism that I do have deals with decomposition. After a full month of being exposed to the elements, the bodies are in remarkably good shape. Part of that we can attribute to it being cold. The Gobi Desert is a cold desert, and we are looking at the period between early January through early March. So make sure that the PCs understand that this is a cold region, and that's why the bodies are still recognizable. Another suggestion that I have is to move the dissected horses into a tent. We know from Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness that the Elder Things will actually use the dissection tables and tools in order to perform their experiments. So you can move the carcass in there, have it covered with a tarp. That way you can explain that that's why scavengers haven't completely picked it apart. And it also gives a good scare to the PCs, when they pull back the tarp and they find these carcasses laid out with all of their organs removed and set on the table next to them in the same arrangement they would have been inside of them, and all the different strange incisions that are made on them. During the night, the PCs will all hear a strange hum, and unless they can all make a hard POW check, they're inexplicably drawn to its source. In the unlikely event that every one of your PCs make this POW check, a thing that I actually did have happen to me, I suggest that you add an extreme POW check once they reach the mouth of the cave. The PCs are probably going to be following all of the NPCs, the porters, and any affected PCs, trying to figure out why they're going, what they're doing, and then once they reach the mouth of the cave, where it's suddenly so much louder, call for an extreme POW check. That way you can get the rest of them entranced, and they'll go inside and go through the portal. The adventure doesn't specify if the horses are drawn as well, so keepers, you get to decide if you want to have the horses come for what's next. Once they pass through the portal, the characters find themselves in an alien and bizarre dimension called the Great White Space. This area might wreak havoc on their sanity, and so expect several of the porters to lose their minds and start ripping their eyeballs out, Event Horizon style. Eventually, someone will spot that one of the millions of membranous honeycombs along the wall is torn and fluttering. I suggest adding some other evidence that this was done by the missing expedition team, possibly initials carved into the wall, or maybe there's a tangled rope that's been tied there and it's kind of floating and just kind of right next to the gate. It's kind of a sign, and that might be what they saw first, is the rope, and then they see the torn membrane that it's next to. If they need a little bit of motivation to go through this portal, you can go ahead and send in one of these raptors of Tinladas. Seeing this creature will strain their already damaged sanity, and chances are high that the raptor will actually go for one of the 22 porters that's still with them instead of the PCs, so you can feel free to make it really, really brutal if it's going for the red shirts. Once they go through the portal, they'll be transported to a strange and tropical world. One look at the 3 moons and the PCs will know for certain that they are no longer on Earth. The sighting of a flying pterosaur right after that will confirm this.
Yes, this is a fertile land, and we will thrive. We will rule over this land, and we will call it this land.
Firefly?
Really? Oh, all right then. How's this? Welcome to Jurassic Park. Oh, and keepers, once they arrive here, play the Jurassic Park soundtrack for your players. Trust me, they'll love it.
There will also be some vomiting and sanity checks required at this discovery. The PCs can find evidence of dried vomit from the expedition team a month before, hinting that they're on the right path. However, this is a warm and moist environment that's teeming with bugs, and something like tasty puke is not going to last that long around them. I suggest you add something a little less biodegradable here, such as cigarette butts or burnt matchsticks or maybe even spent bullet casings. The module provides a map of this area, and it also goes one step further by providing a player version of the map without the location markers. So a huge thanks to Goodman Games for that, because it allows the keepers to give the players something without spoiling the surprises. The PCs notice a gold building glinting in the distance and will probably want to head there. One thing that I suggest is to add some evidence of the Norris team doing the same thing, such as bits of trash or evidence of passage, such as machete-cut branches or blackened campfire pits or any other evidence that they can follow. On their way, they're going to encounter several mutated dinosaurs.
Something from the dinosaur family. A prehistoric beast. Come on, King Kong, 1933? It's a classic.
How many encounters they face is up to the keeper. If it's a short convention game, probably not that many. If you're doing a long, multi-session adventure, have at it. But if you're going to be using a lot of dinosaurs, just remember that each separate breed requires a sanity check. So you might consider capping the total sanity loss from mutated dinosaurs just to allow more types without driving the PCs all permanently insane before the big finale. Eventually the PCs will stumble on a trail or see some circling vultures or some other hint that leads them to the bodies of several mutilated porters. That's when the T-Rex strikes. The PCs might also discover the Trudons, the primitive people who live here. Think of them sort of like lizardy Ewoks. Their village is on the map, but the PCs might discover them at any time. One thing that I do suggest is having evidence of them prior to the PC seeing them, such as jungle idols or arrows that are stuck in trees, pretty much the entire opening for Raiders of the Lost Ark. The whole time you should also be wearing down the number of porters. Use them as fodder. Have them flee in panic and serve as dire warnings of what not to do in this strange world. And they can also be used as people that need rescuing from time to time. They're perfect little red shirts and use them freely. There's 22 of them, so I made a spreadsheet just to keep track of them all, and I suggest doing something similar. After some misadventures, the PC should arrive at the Gold Pyramid, covered in strange reliefs that will take hours to decipher, but reveal the history of the Elder Thing laboratory. Inside, they'll encounter alien technology, fight 2 Elder Thing scientists, and discover the survivors of the missing expedition. Their sanity will be pushed to the breaking point, and any PCs that aren't indefinitely insane by now will be very soon. One suggestion that I do have is to increase the scale of the rooms from 5-foot squares to 10-foot. In the lab where Dr. Norris is found, in addition to the 3 large tanks and the controlled console, there are 23 NPCs in here. Once you add the PCs, Chang Li, any of Chang Li's porters, and an Elder Thing, there's no room at all for them to move. So increasing the size from 30 feet to 60 feet would really help, especially if you use miniatures. Somewhere in here is when Chang Li will finally go insane and order his men to attack and arrest all of the characters.
Chang Li, curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal.
While the module says that all of his remaining porters will follow him, I suggest that if the PCs have befriended any of the porters by showing them little acts of kindness or maybe rescuing them during a dinosaur attack, that the PCs might have an ally or two among the porter ranks that can help them out during this. This is a way of rewarding them if they've done any good role-playing during their journey. Once the Norris team has been rescued, that's the time for the PCs to finally get home. This is where we enter my only actual problem with the module. The adventure states that the Elder Things can navigate the great white space because they've spent eons learning how. So even if the PCs figure out how to operate the device to open the portal, they must randomly roll to see where it takes them, and there's only a 3% chance of it being their home instead of an array of alien worlds or times. If this is a one-shot, I'm fine with that. Otherwise, I'm not. I feel that characters that read and deciphered the boss reliefs on the temple should have a better chance of success. How I did it was that I started with a 3% chance, and then I added any points for any mythos rating of the character that's going to be operating it. I also made them specify how many luck points they want to add to this roll prior to them making the roll. So if they had, let's say, a 20 mythos and decide to add 20 luck points, that comes to a 43% chance of reaching their intended destination of home. Now, keepers, you can approach this any way you like, but if this is going to be part of a longer campaign, I feel that you should at least give them a chance to make it home, just for the fact that they did stop and they researched everything while they were there. If they didn't research the temple and they just grabbed the controls and have at it, give them that 3% chance and punish them accordingly. My final criticism I have is rather tiny, and it's not that much worth mentioning, but this is a review, so I'm going to go for it. While the art of the module is extremely good, and I've shown it throughout the review, there's not much of it, which is fine. But two of the few pictures there are show other worlds where unfortunate characters might end up if they go through the wrong portal, namely Yugoth and Carcosa. They're great pictures, but since the module isn't completely brimming with illustrations, I would have preferred to have used that space to illustrate things that are actually inside the module, such as the Trudons, or an Elder Thing, or the Great White Space, or the Crystal Antenna, the Pyramid's main chamber, or even the ruin of the expedition camp. These are all things that the Keeper will need to describe to their players, and illustrations can help them with their storytelling. So while the art is very good, I'd rather have just focused on what's inside the module rather than what the module could be. Like I said, it's a tiny gripe. Overall, my players had a total blast with this adventure, and I highly recommend it to anyone wanting to try something a bit pulpier. There will be a lot of combat, and sanity will be torn to shreds, but we had a great time.
I second everything that he just said. However, I still got 2 complaints to make. Number 1 is dealing with the timeline. See, Dr. Norris's journal makes it sound like they went through the portal somewhere around January 6th to January 7th. The PCs, we didn't arrive on the scene till around March 6th. Now, all the dissected horses and the bodies and the dried puke and all that, the module all says that that's 1 month old. Now, maybe time worked a little bit differently in 1920s China, but by my math, that is 2 months, not 1, and that is a little bit long for decomposition not to have rendered most of these clues completely useless. My solution? Move the journal dates up 1 month to make the strange hum begin occurring in February. That way, Norris's team has only been missing for a month, like the module is implying, instead of the 2 months, which the module actually ends up saying. Issue number 2 is the story behind the Norris camp. There are questions that the PCs are going to ask the Norris expedition once they meet them. However, the module doesn't answer any of those questions and leaving the GM completely unprepared. Specifically, we're led to believe that the Norris team was hypnotized by the portal and went into the cave and through the Great White Space, just so happened to have randomly chosen out of the thousands of possible portals to cut the membrane and enter the one that just so happens to have the Elder Thing lab. Okay, sure, I'll buy that, no problem. But that's true. When did the Elder Things attack the camp and cut up all those horses? See, if the Elder Things attacked the Norris camp, they'd have taken Norris's team back with them through the portal just like normal, and they wouldn't have slashed open that membrane and left a nice little trail of bodies for the PCs to follow. Also, has Dr. Norris just been lying on the floor of that laboratory for a solid month? I mean, what's he been doing? And, I don't know, maybe time works a little bit differently there. Maybe a month here is like a week there, or a week here is like a month there. I don't know. The module doesn't answer any of these things, but you can bet your ass that your players are going to ask these questions, meaning that the GM needs to have some answers ready for them. So let me give you a few ideas for when your own players start asking questions and trying to punch some holes into the plot. So, when they find Dr. Norris and they're all like, "Yo, Sammy, what the hell happened?" He can tell them this. The hum happened on January 6th, or February if you listen to my first part, and Dr. Norris and the rest of his team that was discovered on the laboratory floor, they were hypnotized and they entered the Great White Space, and they cut open the membrane and they entered the Lost World, and they started gallivanting around and making a scene. The Elder Things, they saw this, thanks to that crystal antenna thing, and they were like, "Oh my God, there's freaking people here. What do we do?" So then on the January 7th, or February, they then go through the portal and they enter the Norris camp, and they capture everybody else that's there. And, while they're there, they go ahead and they cut up some horses and tear apart some cars, because, hey, why not, right? So they take all of those people back through with them, and they're the ones that end up in the tanks. Meanwhile, Norris and his team, they're all traipsing around the Lost World, eaten and getting eaten by mutant dinosaurs until finally the Elder Things are able to catch them, probably with the Shoggoths. This explanation, while simple, It'll explain all of the plot holes and help the PCs understand what happened and not really look too much deeper into it. It makes for a good story. Like I said, this adventure was a lot of fun, and we had a freaking blast. And I would recommend this to anyone that wants to have more of an action or pulpy style game. However, the difference between a good Call of Cthulhu adventure and a great Call of Cthulhu adventure comes down to the story. So, plug up those plot holes, and you got yourself one hell of a great module. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you want to see more of my reviews and videos, just hit the subscribe button. But until next time, have a good day.